What's going on, guys? Welcome back. More Madden 17 commentary. Your guys' reception to this has been incredible. Please take a second to hit the like button, subscribe button, criticism in the comment section. Twitter, Shutdown Safety is my username. If you missed parts 1 and 2, this is the next to last installment of this video. I will leave links down in the description so you can check them out. Obviously, continuing along with the discussion I had with Rex Dickson on Madden 17 now. You've mentioned throughout our conversation, although I haven't directly mentioned it to you, Ultimate Team. A lot of people feel that Ultimate Team has taken the front burner, the absolute priority, because it is, kind of the moneymaker, if you will, in terms of purchasing things through Madden. It really is the only microtransaction you offer within the game. What would you say to someone that feels that every other aspect of Madden, although I understand would get better inherently by improving, MUT, because obviously they kind of work together. How would you respond to someone that feels like MUT takes the priority over anything else in this game?
Well, it's simply not true. I mean, I'm looking at the resource distribution by team, and the MUT team is what the MUT team is. We haven't shifted resources over there. We haven't sort of stolen resources from CFM or gameplay to bolster up MUT. None of that stuff has happened. Each team has a set amount of resources that we call, like, this is this core team, and this is what we need to achieve our year-over-year goals in each space. Now, sometimes when some feature like Draft Champions comes out, it does pull some of the resources away from CFM or MUT or otherwise. But this year we didn't have sort of that huge new mode. We sort of went back and invested in the modes we have, thank God. But yeah, I mean, MUT basically funds itself, so that doesn't take anything away from any other team. If anything, I'd say that we're trying to have a tighter integration of MUT with gameplay, because essentially, the interesting thing about MUT is when you get to the higher levels and you're playing with like 99 golden ticket players and really buffed out like 98 overall teams, the game wasn't really designed with that in mind. So the gameplay team has really taken it upon their shoulders to say, hey, we need to start paying a lot more attention to MUT because that game plays completely differently than how we intended it because of what's going on with all those cards and those ratings. So if anything, we're getting tighter integrated with those guys. But all I would say to your listeners is you don't have to be concerned about any one team stealing any other team's resources because we really don't function that way. MUT has its own dedicated team. Gameplay has its own dedicated team, CFM, etc.
You had spoke earlier about streamlining some things and some of those frustration points and slow points in the game. There are people that have a dramatic concern about the disk space of Madden and understandably want to translate that to the lack of Madden being a full 60 meg disk, must mean that it's oversimplistic in its programming or it's not utilizing all its assets. Can you elaborate as to why that the game really is just so small on the disk compared to other in-market titles, and if that's a benefit or a detractor in terms of the actual game itself?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in game development long enough. I've heard these arguments over and over. It doesn't mean anything to me. How big the game is on the disk of the file size, like, what does that matter? It's all about, like, how many modes do you have? How many hours do you get to put in? Do you keep a separate save file inside of MUT and CFM? How much value are you, the individual user, getting out of the game? If anything, if we're not filling up the disk, I'd just say that's good news because it only means that we can put more stuff on there. Although, I think when you play Madden, you won't find, I don't think anyone will complain that this experience is thin or that there's not enough depth in Madden. It certainly doesn't strike me as one of those types of games where you only get a few hours of enjoyment out of it and then it kind of grows stale because there are so many ways to play. So, I don't put much stock in disk size or anything like that. I could probably go talk to some engineers and get a technical interpretation for why that's the case, but it doesn't mean anything other than more ways that I can chew up that content with commentary or animations or God knows what else.
You had spoke earlier in the week in an interview and said that all the Generation 3 physics are out of the game. And I'm assuming that this is all at the benefit of the Infinity Engine. Briefly, could you explain why the Generation 3 physics stayed in the game for so long, but also secondarily to that, with Frostbite now coming in through other titles, have you just gotten to the point where we fully optimized with the Infinity Engine and now you're going to have carryover with Frostbite and maybe have to restart this process or no?
So I won't talk at all about Frostbite because, the official line on that for Madden is no comment at this time. But, you know, the Ignite physics system, or what we call EA physics, will exist inside of Ignite or Frostbite or any other engine. That is a common package that is universal to all games within EA that are using that system. It's the same as our animation system, Ant. You know, whether you know this or not, you know, the Ant animation engine, which runs, you know, Battlefront and all the other Frostbite games, is the same Ant animation engine that runs inside of Ignite. So you're not going to see too many changes within those core systems, because those are systems that are used across EA regardless of engine. That's what all our people are trained up on. I know that in times you guys like to think that a new engine means a complete overhaul and that system works completely differently, but it really doesn't work that way. It's really improvements on existing systems. If you're talking about like the Unreal Engine and the changes that they've made to their matinee time sequencer, well, it's really the same thing it's always been. It's just moderate improvements year over year over year to get it to be the best fully functional time sequencer in game editing. And it's kind of the same thing with our stuff. So don't assume that, you know, when FIFA moves to Frostbite engine, it means completely new animation engine, completely new this, completely new that, because those things are common across all EA games, and a lot of them won't change. In some cases, you will find major changes, like in their rendering engine, in their lighting engine, but in terms of like what we were just talking about, animation, physics, stuff like that, it's going to be pretty much the same thing carried over into the new engine. To go back to your first point about optimizations, basically what happened is our high-end physics system, Ignite Physics, was running in most cases right where the camera was, but some players who were further away from the camera were running what we call a physics LOD, a lower detail version of the physics engine. And at the lowest level, that was still running Gen 3 Ignite Physics, as was the ball. So by bringing all that stuff over, and then we had to take on a lot of big pieces. When we deprecated legacy physics, we also lost what we call our blipping solution, which is how we get characters to sort of bump off of each other instead of like, you know, smush and mush into each other, which we've had a lot of problems with in our physics engine. So we had to write a whole new blipping solution for avoidance so that players could kind of bump off of each other without like smushing and getting onto all this physics mush. That took quite a long time because we had a system like that before. We needed to replace it with a new system, but we needed the new system to be better. And when we got into all the chucks and defensive ends coming off the line versus the tight end who was trying to release, two receivers who were running quick slants and ran into each other, there was a million cases where all of a sudden everything was different because we wrote a new system. And, you know, it's not something we're going to go out there and sell like, hey, new blipping system. But the impact of removing legacy physics, this is just one of the paths that it opens up that we have to then go down and close it out. But I think overall you're going to find that the game moves and feels with a sense of momentum and weight that have never been there before, and that's all results of the new physics stuff.
You had mentioned before, and I don't know that I'd actually heard you specifically say this prior, that you felt this was the most proud you've been of this game. If you could just sum up why, what would make Madden 17 that one point where you would look at this and say, okay, in the Rex Dickson legacy of building Madden games for the past few years, this one is the best because why? What's the trademark you have on this game where you're willing to come out and say this is the best it's going to be, or maybe for right now the best it has been, in your opinion?
It's really getting in all the pieces, the final pieces of that 3-year plan that we wanted to get to. Gaps is huge. And mainly because the gaps and zones represent counters for almost every offensive concept. Now that's big because what you have to understand is that now that there's a defensive counter for every offensive concept, it means that the chess match actually exists. You can't run fallback dive every play. You can't run inside zone every play because there are defensive counters that stop it. If somebody's running corner routes on you or C routes and crushing your man defense, and you all of a sudden change to zone and call like a seam flat, that play is gone. That play is not there anymore. You can't run it anymore. So you sort of force your opponent to adapt. And it works the same way with the CPU. I'll just give you one example. When I get into 3rd and long, what I normally run, and this goes back 10, 15 years of playing Madden, is 4 verticals where I have my slot receiver running the mountain route over the middle, the deep cross. And the reason why I run that is because I know if that hook zoner tries to go, get vertical with my slot. As soon as the slot makes his cut, that hook zoner is going to stay right where he is and let him come up over the top. But now, when they run a match defense, or when that guy's in a vertical hook, he drops with that receiver and stays with him. And so a read that has been there for almost 20 years in Madden is now taken away because there's an effective concept counter. That kind of breaks players' brains, because a read that's been there for 20 years isn't there anymore, and it looks different. There's times when you see zone and then they switch to man in the middle of a play, and it really jacks you up because you've never seen it in the game before. And I think a collection of probably 5 or 6 or 7 of those features that really, when they dictate their outcomes, or when their outcomes make themselves known, it feels like, wow, I've never seen this in Madden before, but I've certainly seen it in football before. That goes from everything to the knockouts, to the sack fumbles, to the block special teams plays. Like, all that stuff just feels a lot more realistic in its outcomes. And to me, that's like the biggest thing, is like the game plays so fundamentally differently, because most of the features we've added this year are game changers. Like, you can feel them having a major impact in the outcome of games every single time you play.
All right, and to close this out, guys, again, you have to understand, EA has to start to see that you guys come to my channel to watch this information, that it means a lot to you, that they take time out of their day in the office to come and speak to me. So I urge you to take an extra minute of your day. If you enjoyed any of these, to go over to Twitter, let him know that you appreciate the time, let EA Sports know that you thank him for the availability. The next video, I actually set it all by itself, because I know you guys are going to have a very large response to it, if not the most of all of them. A question that I wanted answered, a question that you guys want answered: how do they take the actual feedback from the non-game changers, myself, people like you that make your own video out there, and use that in terms of making the game better? And inadvertently, Rex actually talks a little bit about my exclusion from the Game Changer program. So I think you guys are going to find this very insightful and informative. Appreciate you checking it out. Again, back very shortly with more content.